So we noted that in the final vision of Daniel, there's an emphasis on the location of Daniel at the river Tigris, the great river, and what is the value of placing Daniel here and emphasizing that, and then these references to a river throughout the vision. So one of those references comes in chapter 11, as it describes in verse 10, his son shall wage war and assemble a multitude of great forces, which shall keep coming and overflow and pass through. So that's the description of a river that's in flood and has risen up over its banks and overflowed. And as it sweeps through, it's taking all of the homes and so on along the riverbank and destroying them and taking it with them. So that's an emphasis on the description of the power of a river. And then here in chapter 11, verse 22, we have another reference, the army shall be utterly swept away. Again, it's as if a giant flood of a river has gone through and swept an army with them. And it says it again here in verse 26, his army shall be swept away. And if you had read Isaiah 8, you would have seen the same idea, that a river is both destructive, but it's also a purgation. It purges because it washes everything away. And the idea is that as these military campaigns unfolded across the lands of Palestine, with the armies of the south coming up in through Palestine, and then the armies from the north coming down and meeting them through Palestine. Palestine's off in the borderland between these two armies facing each other in combat. The outposts, the garrisons on the very edge of these two Greek empires it's a very volatile zone, a kind of no man's land. And as these massive armies sweep through the promised land, they are destroying the forests, burning and pillaging villages, and taking captives and so on. And it's as if a flood has gone through and destroyed everything in its path. And then as it recedes, you just see this absolute mess of destruction. And this is just these rivers are going through in waves as these military campaigns unfold. So it's just an awful description of the destruction of these military campaigns, but also of how God is using it as discipline, that it's intended to purge and to wash away and to cleanse. It has that ultimate goal. The other question we had was, why all this emphasis on angels and the combat and the conflict between the princes that are above Persia and Greece and Israel? What do we make of the conflict between these angelic beings, the Prince of Persia, the Prince of Greece, the Prince of Israel, and this divine figure in sort of open combat? And then they're called the Prince of Greece, the Prince of Israel, the Prince of Persia, because their actions are affecting the governments, the nations, the politics, the warfare, and so on earth. So why is there this emphasis? Well, it's giving us another perspective on what's actually going on. We're used to assuming that everything that goes on in the world is really just a question of politics and culture and maybe religious disputes, things like this, but it's all just humans fighting among themselves. And that really is the full explanation of what's going on in this world. But the final vision of Daniel is opening up to the reality, opening us up to the reality that there are principalities and powers, both good and bad, that are themselves involved in the political machinations and the political conflicts between nations here on earth. And so this is revealed to Daniel. It's similar to when Jesus is being arrested in Luke, and he responds to them and says, "This is your hour and the power of darkness." And he's not talking just about that they're doing something bad. He means that there are dark forces that are moving through the nation to secure his arrest and secure this opposition to him. And it's not just explained by the politics of the high priests, Caiaphas and Annas, and the tensions with Rome and Pilate and things like this. There's another layer above them of spiritual war, of beings beyond our world that are engaged in the conflicts in this world. So this is another aspect to these visions, is seeing the truth of what's really going on, that it's not just about politics. But then this raises the question of what then is the focus of this conflict? What's the epicenter, or what is ground zero for these conflicts? As you read chapter 11 and you see the vision, you see that it has a number of endings, right? There's a structure to it. The first one here in chapter 11 starts in around verse 3, where you sort of set the stage. Here, the first end. Notice there's a reference to the end. And I've quoted here from the ASV, because the ESV doesn't quite use the exact Hebrew literally. But there's these references. So that's one of the first ones here. And then you have another ending, what seems like it's the end, the appointed time of the end, but it's not the end. It just seems like it. As they're going through it, it feels like these military campaigns have come to a head, and this is going to be the climactic end. You see another reference here in verse 29, as the third ending seems to be, anyway, the time of the end, but it's really not quite yet there. We're still waiting for the time of the end. So the structure, then you finally, of course, get to the time of the end in verse 36 following, and you see it goes all the way through to the waking up to everlasting life, and some to shame and everlasting contempt. So that's final judgment. So that is it. At the end, there is the time of the end when you get to that final section there. So there's 4 endings, but only the fourth one is the true time of the end. The other ones are just sort of creating a pattern that it looks like you're getting toward the end, but then it keeps extending. So that's sort of the structure of it. But what's the focus? What's the epicenter of all these military campaigns, of all this conflict? What really ultimately is the focus from the perspective, not just so much in the world politics and the greed and the power struggles and all these various ways of trying to flatter and seduce and secure your political will against another empire, what is essentially another facet of the Greek Empire. What's really going on from the perspective of the Prince of Persia, the Prince of Greece, the Prince of Michael, from the divine figure's perspective, what's really at the center of this conflict that it ultimately explains it? So that's the first question. And then this structure, what's the value of it? The fact that there is a structure to the end here, these series of endings building toward the time of the end. What's the value of that prophetically, and for the people who are reading the prophecy, reading the book, and trying to respond appropriately to it? So best wishes, and we'll see you next time.